Welcome to the conversation today on different models for utility collaboration. I'm Kate Burson. I'm with a firm called Radia Capital, an investment firm, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. We have three truly outstanding panelists with us today. First, we have Lucian Balea, who's Deputy Director of R&D and Open Source Director at RTE. He has held leadership roles across the R&D, markets, finance since 2003 at RTE. And in 2018, he partnered with the Linux Foundation to establish LF Energy. So we also all owe a big thanks to you and your leadership of making this possible. He's really been driving this initiative forward in a beautiful way. And then we have Mirko Pracht, Director of Digitalization and System Operations at 50 Hertz. He has been at 50 Hertz for 20 years in IT and digitalization, and he has now been 10 years in management at 50 Hertz. He has been leading major transformations throughout the company, which he'll be talking about today. Importantly, he also is a big espresso and food fan and can talk at length about that as well, which we will be discussing later. And finally, we have Tim Breitenbach. He's head of data and development at Swissgrid. He is an energy economist by training, but moved into software engineering and is focused on the Swissgrid's data platform and developer environments. Just before diving in, I want to share why I've actually traveled a long way to be here. I'm not a software engineer, and I don't work in a utility. I work in an investment firm, and I help build companies. But I've been working in the energy transition, energy system for almost 20 years, and have seen just how critical digitalization is to this transformation. In fact, it is, from what I've been seeing in working with utilities and regulators and companies, a real binding constraint in our evolution. And so I connected with LF Energy a couple of years ago, asking the questions, how do we make the system more interoperable? How do we build off of all of this great work that's happening in different pockets of the world? And so when Alex reached out to see if I would moderate this panel, I just said yes. I didn't ask any questions like, where is it? And so it's a real honor to be here with all of you and be advancing this conversation, and hopefully we'll keep growing and get some real progress out of this this conference and beyond. Some of the questions that we have is, what would it take to truly build off of the other work of other utilities at scale? What does it take to make systems truly interoperable in the utility system and kind of be able to break free from the vendor lock-in that we're all kind of a bit uncomfortable and maybe tired of? So we're looking to have candid lessons, candid conversations, experiences from each of them, and that's not always easy to do, but these are the people to do it. So we're going to start with each of the panelists to share a little bit about their own unique journey. They're all at different stages and have different cultures in their organizations. And so I'm going to hand it to Lucian first to talk about his experience and an example at RTE.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's one of the greatest business events of the year for me to be here with you today, and I'm quite impressed. So indeed, our open source journey started in 2018, and in a nutshell, the main trigger was the fact that we got convinced that we had to speed up our digitalization roadmap. So RT, as a transmission system operator, is facing growingly tangible operational challenges, transformation challenges, and we had the conviction that the traditional way of acquiring our digital solutions, and by that I mean either buying them off the shelf or developing them internally, would never scale. And of course, the motivation behind that are related to the energy transition, to the need to onboard new renewables, to the need to optimize the development of our grid, to face this transformation, to optimize our asset management practices with aging infrastructure, etc. So really key challenges for RT. And to meet those challenges, well, to succeed in that, well, the digital solutions will be key, will be a key factor of success. And then we got the intuition looking at other industries that maybe the open source model could be a solution to our problem. And the problem, if I try to describe it in a few words, is how do we reconcile the need to accelerate innovation, to have better additive innovation, and with constrained resources. So how do we ensure also resource efficiency, because we cannot increase our teams and budget indefinitely. So that was the start of the journey with the Linux Foundation and the creation of LF Energy. Across that journey, we had to tackle many issues, from understanding IP implications, licenses, adjusting our software development practices, learning to work with the external communities, articulating our procurement practices with our open source strategy, etc. So maybe I will not be able to go through all these steps today, unfortunately, but maybe a few points there. So first of all, if we list all the questions, they may seem overwhelming for someone who would like to move to open source and then look at what needs to be done. Indeed, but one lesson that we learned from our experience is that maybe the best way to succeed in an open source journey is to start the open source journey. And by that, what I mean is that, well, starting soon, small, with limited risk, and practicing helps demystifying many things. And then many problems can be solved easily when interacting with the community, because all those questions, we all went through the same questions, etc., and found some answers. So maybe we can help others now to grow through that. Maybe three topics I would like to emphasize on in that journey. First one, from the start, we had the conviction that a successful open source journey would not mean RT using open source and developing internally. It would not be efficient if we would work only with our peer TSOs, peer TSO and DSOs, and that we had to onboard a large ecosystem. And for that, we had to work on our procurement practices. So this may be a topic that we will elaborate on. Then another point, another key factor of success was for us was C-level support. So support, we had to adjust practices at various parts of the company, and we had also to be credible towards the external partners when we launched collaboration. So C-level support was key to that. And in that respect, something we are proud of today is that we have strong support at CEO level at RT. If you go to our web page, opensource.rt-france.com, you will see some verbatims from our CEO, so he's a strong fan of what we are doing. So that's a key achievement. Last point, but not least, setting up an OSPO. I will not elaborate on that. There will be a great panel on this topic later today, but maybe the first significant milestone in an open source journey is when we set an OSPO. So then, where are we today? Are we successful? What are the results of that? For me, the best answer is what's happening today here during those 2 days. During my 20-plus years of experience in the industry, I've never seen any other initiative that led to such kind of vibrant ecosystem. So this is one proof of success. And maybe concretely, there are 2 projects that are quite successful for us, the CPAS project and Possible project, that have a strong presence in the agenda during this event. And if you look at the talks for these projects, well, a large part of them are made by parties that are not RT people, persons that are not RT employees. And that's a concrete proof that we are benefiting from resource leverages and also additive innovation, because others have joined this project and they are actively participating. Maybe I should stop here.
That's great. I mean, well, Pastor Tim, but I just want to, I mean, those pieces that you mentioned are very big. And so I know probably afterwards, I mean, getting the C-level support and being able to adjust the procurement. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tim. Not Tim, Mirko, apologies.
So first of all, really cool to see so many people for such an interesting and challenging topic. And from my side, good morning. I'm Mirko, responsible for the digitalization and system operations at 50 Hertz. And with that, directly responsible for the challenges within the control centers in system operations. When talking about open source at 50 Hertz and also within Balea Group, because within Balea Group we are with Balea Transmission Belgium and 50 Hertz 2 TSOs. Then, at least from my perspective, I can, jumping back to the start of our energy transition and discussion about digitalization in approximately 2019, 2020. We started with the fact that already in 2019, 2020, we had at 50 Hertz the situation of an average feed-in of renewable energies of more than 60%. And when you are visiting a control center, when they are facing the situation of a tremendous feed-in of renewable energy, then you can see the stress and the pressure the guys in the control center have, and that they have a really big demand for new digital products within the control center, where they can interacting with the challenges to keep the system stable, even in such situations. And this was a kind of starting point for us, in a way to say, from a strategy perspective, we have to look into the question of how we are creating more speed in providing and commissioning of digital products, because to be honest, in 2019, 2020, this was something we can optimize. Secondly, how we are creating more flexibility, because requirements are changing, and how we make it possible to adapt more and more. And we need a kind of scalability, because with so many additional information, with so many additional data, you need an environment where you can scale. And based on all these aspects, we started in 2019, 2020 MCCS, Modular Control Center System, with a big vision of creating a kind of modular control center system environment where you can create business modules for congestion management, for monitoring and control, for load frequency control, and all the typical stuff in electrical engineering of system operations into an environment where you can directly plug and play such modules into the setup. So we started this in 2020 and pushed forward with the topic that for sure we will start also within the organization to develop some of the modules on our own, and from a TSO perspective also going into the topic of being a software development company. You can imagine a fundamental change and paradigm shift in the company itself. And for sure also to include modules and components which are not coming from our side, which can be integrated because they are available as commercial products, but also, and this was also kind of new element, because they are available on the market from an open source perspective. And this was in a kind of also our starting point to involve into the situation of open source. And with the progress of the initiative, we came in a closer discussion and collaboration with our friends and colleagues at Energinet. And by coincidence, it's quite funny that Peter is sitting here. Peter is from Energinet. And we started a discussion about why not discussing how we are make it possible to exchange also modules. Is there something we are creating at MCCS which can be used on the side of Energinet? And is there something on the Energinet side which we can use at 50 Hertz? And to be honest, and to speak frankly on that, we had not the straightest way to come to the point of open source, because at the beginning we believed, hey, why not creating a kind of collaboration approach and talking with the legal and the procurement guys it can be much easier to simply exchange modules. And then we started a discussion with legal and procurement, and we learned a lot. Aria is in the room here. Maybe Aria, you can just give a sign. He can explain you long stories about the challenges we had in this discussion. And quite close to what you already mentioned, I would at one point we learned a lot in this aspect. A lot in the discussion about open source in companies like a TSO is not only the technical perspective, it's, to be honest, also not only the point of legal and procurement, it's also a point of cultural change within the company that open source and open source products can have a quality which can be integrated into components for a control center, and that it is not unsecure to using open source components. And this is also a very big part of our journey to show step by step and very iteratively that this can be a very good way to achieving the flexibility and the speed, and that it is a good point in the portfolio in general to push forward in the digitalization. We learned a lot, and given by the fact and the discussion we had with Energinet, we learned also that going into the direction of open source is a very good starting point and a very good integration part to coming to the point of also exchange and being in interaction for different modules. And so we intensify and push forward also in the topic how we are integrating more and more questions about open source, having an OSPO, working on the structure, how we are making possible not only to use open source, but also to contribute and to create. And I would say from a perspective of a LIA group, we are within the journey, we learned a lot, and going into the direction that it is a very valuable and a key element for a successful energy transition and the digitalization.
Thank you. I will come back. We'll have a lot of questions there. Let's hear from Tim.
Yes, for sure. Also, good morning from me. I guess on this round, we are the ones who have the least knowledge of open source yet. We just started the journey. In fact, 3 years ago, we started in-house software development, so we are quite far behind in the TSO landscape. So going from we buy everything to now we build stuff on our own as well, and in the future also to contribute and to even build in public and to really be in the open source community is something we're looking forward to, mainly because, I mean, you could argue that the pan-European grid within all grid levels is one of the biggest machines that humanity has built. So we build it together, and that's why it works as well as it does. So we should also keep that in mind when we build the software for it, that we build all of it together, we exchange ideas. I think it's quite cool that we already have TSO colleagues exchanging modules and like working together, because the energy transition is something that is challenging for all of us, for all companies who work in this. And I don't think any single company can break it and succeed without collaboration with universities, with other TSOs, with all sorts of people who have good ideas and solve problems. That being said, currently we are at the stage where I always say all good IT projects start somewhere in the shadow. So yeah, we had some colleagues who were, before they joined Swissgrid, who like build stuff, really like to contribute in their private time to open source projects. And at some point they were like, hey, I wrote something cool for the company. I want to contribute this in the name of Swissgrid back to the original project. And that was, they came to me and I was like, oh, this is gonna get fun. Because we ran exactly into the problems that those two colleagues mentioned. Legal had to do some assessment, procurement was like, can we do that? Then at some point HR knocked on the door and said, hey, we have a work contract and it says everything that gets built in work time belongs to the company, and yeah, the usual fun stuff in a big corporation. Currently we're not stuck, but we are in a state where, okay, we have approval from legal that we can do this in the name of Swissgrid, but we haven't pushed further yet that we build projects in public with an open community. We are not at that stage yet.
Great. I want to take my privilege as a moderator and ask some questions around some of these shared themes, and then I'd like to open it up afterwards to the audience, because you guys, I'm sure, have a lot of questions from being in similar seats. One of the consistent themes is this is maybe much less about technology and much more about humans and culture change. And I'd like to hear from each of you, kind of starting with Lucian, what gave you that energy to do this, to take on this issue, to kind of lead this fight? Dealing with legal and procurement at a minimum is a headache. So I would love to hear both, what gave you the conviction to fight for this, and then also what in the end, which you've touched on a little bit, was the kind of the most effective argument to get them on board?
Okay, so maybe the first conviction came from the necessity. So, and the frustration to see that we have so many challenges and that it's going so slow to get what we want, and that each year we add on top of our roadmap new needs, and then the budget is not increasing, and we see that this will lead to nowhere. And especially when you put constraints on a tense roadmap, then you get bad quality results, and then it's even worse, counterproductive. So this necessity was one factor. The other triggering factor was meeting other communities and discovering the power of this kind of assembly with a mixture of partners that want to move things forward with a lot of energy, and we don't have to spend 1 year into negotiating legal stuff before we can start to rush into the real problem. And was also something really convincing for me. So now the next question is, how do we convince the company, the people, the management to get on board? Maybe we were lucky at some point of time to get easily, as I mentioned, C-level support, and that may not be always the case. So this was we probably have been lucky in this journey to some extent. The other point is that we also discovered that some projects were really motivated because the people knew the open source model, and they find that this was a motivating factor for them, because when my developments are used by a third party, it's also a recognition of what I'm doing, the quality of what I'm doing, etc. So it's more visibility. It unlocks a little bit innovation, and it also empowers technical community that sometimes are fed up about too much blah blah and processes and talk, etc. So let's talk more code, as Alex said, is maybe something that also helps. So we got support both from the top level, both from some teams, and that was the starting point, I think.
Great, Mirko.
Yes. One key element for us was the fact that we started to include typical stuff which are known from a lot of different industries and where there are protocols, applications and services which are already there, which are heavily used, and exploring on the fact that we started to integrate it into our logic and into our vision and strategy. So as to give an example, we started to say, hey, we need a kind of event streaming, and why not using something like Kafka, just to simply coming to the point that a lot of data which is ingested into the electrical system is a kind of event, processing it in the same way and in the same logic, and also with that populating all the data to the relevant modules. And this was one example to having the discussion point, given the fact that something like Kafka is available as open source. It is used tremendously in a lot of industries. And why not using it such an environment we have also for the operational technology or the control center applications? And this was also a good trigger point, besides the fact that we identified on the market that there are interesting open source initiatives for load flow calculations, N-1 calculations, and we started to simply give it a try and try to compare the first results with the results we have in our today's grid and with the commercial applications, and see how close or in which way of gap we are actually there, and we identified that there is a lot of interesting potential to invest into the topic, because we have seen a lot of good results and started to elaborate what is the best way to support and investing into this direction, because we are aware we cannot completely create all the stuff on our own. This is, from a budget perspective, simply not possible, and will also not get the commitment of the C-level. And so we started in the discussions with procurement, legal, and all the people. And to be honest, at the beginning we had taken a big mistake, because we organized meetings. We had one room with the technical guys, and all the technical guys discussed the topics. We had one room, all the legal guys discussed the topics, and we had one room and all the procurement guys discussed the topic. To be honest, this was a mess. And we changed the philosophy that also the technical guys have to hear and to understand what are the typical limitations, the constraints from a procurement or a legal perspective which are in the room, and then collaboratively, even in the fact of the different aspects of legal, procurement, IT security, the technical guys, what can be a way forward to achieve the goal. And to be honest, there was a big purpose in the room from all the people of the different domains to going into these directions and to find a solution and to be aware of. This is something which is completely new for us. We have to learn how to do that, and to simply accept that we have to learn how to do that. And this was one of the openings to have a much better discussion, also with the guys of procurement, legal, IT security, to finding good solutions. And making this awareness was a kind of part of the change, the transition we started. And this was one of the key success elements to push forward in the topic.
Since we are not so far in the journey yet, I can only explain from the legal side. But I actually wanted to go a little bit more in the strategic thought idea that we have when we think about open source, because currently we buy a lot of stuff from vendors, and I mean there are, I would say, very successful procurements where we are really happy with the vendor, where we have partnerships with some companies for many years. I think occasionally, and just by statistics, you also have procurements where it doesn't go so well, and you're kind of bottlenecked by what you bought in the end for quite a long time, because at least for Swissgrid, like a European tender takes like 9 months in average to do it. So it's not the fastest process. I guess for the colleagues, this is kind of similar. So open source there is like a way to kind of extend your solution space. And I was actually really happy to be here yesterday, because I already got quite a lot of ideas how to, with open source, how to work around the procurement and how to design then a procurement in a way that open source is kind of part of the solution space. And we don't choose a technology and hope that some vendor sells it to us, but we really find maybe a partner that together with us builds it based on this open source technology, which then also we can then, it's kind of like an indirect investment also in the open source community, because then we will also contribute to that specific project that we choose.
That's excellent reason. That's a great incentive to do the open source. I mean, the procurement cycle is, I know, probably a pain for everyone involved. Mirko, I want to kind of jump back into what you shared in the collaboration at the beginning with Peter and his company. Where are you guys right now, and in this partnership, in terms of kind of pilot stage or scaled? I really kind of want to understand what are the steps in taking collaboration that is, really unique like this, from the early pilot to being able to scale it throughout your operation?
Yes, actually, we are very clear in the way forward by having a kind of nucleus, a kind of MVP, which should be a starting base. And the starting base is, when talking with our guys of Energinet, how we can provide something for the supervisory and monitoring of the grid. and our colleagues at Energinet in the way in the direction of load frequency control. And this is a kind of real concrete element where we are starting to try to push forward in the open sourcing from both perspectives of the companies, and using that as a starting point to learn and to understand how, in general, we can making possible that we are investing and integrating in general in open source. And the trigger point is always a very concrete element. So this exchange by getting a benefit for load frequency control and getting a benefit for supervisory and monitoring of the grid is a very concrete element. And with this concrete element and the benefit also for the business, we are pushing forward in a general way forward of the company how to invest in open source, and this combination is quite helpful. To be honest, I believe it's also a very good successful way, because at least in my experiences with transmission system operators, it's much better and helpful to have a concrete use case, a concrete scenario which you are using to forcing the topic and pushing forward, and learn how you can then leverage on the point and bring it to additional use cases and perspectives. This is the much more successful way, and this is at least something which is working for us. And today, I would say from both dimensions we are on the way. So from both dimensions, we are pushing forward how we are making the modules and components available as open source, because this should be the baseline and the foundation for the exchange.
Great. So from the very beginning, you're designing, though, everything is designed for scale. And you're, okay, once we've met this metric, you're simultaneously, as you've been sharing, working internally on, continuously on the buy-in. I mean, what do you see as the time horizon, let's say, for being able to, kind of scale, assuming you meet your metrics? What's your estimate? There's a little smile there.
I smile by the reason that quite often also from different management boards, we are getting the question, what is the time you are ready with the control center system? And this is, to be honest, a hard question, because the reality is never. Because there are so many requirements which are changeably continuously that you will always have the situation to be adapt. So thinking in different opportunities of different solutions and adapt the software components and going with the requirements and their changes should be a kind of part of our DNA in this business, and should be also involved in the question how we are talking about software engineering and open source. And so I like the idea to see that there are different initiatives bringing up open source components and solutions, and that we can integrate them and elaborate on them, how they are fitting into the requirements and fitting our purposes, and being flexible on that, because I believe we need this flexibility, and the point that all of this stuff is completely completed will not existing anymore. We need this flexibility and this continuously working on the solutions itself.
Agreed. So you need to be nimble and dynamic. But at what stage are you allowed to start rolling out at a larger scale? Will your colleagues accept that this is a living product?
As I said, we have a kind of very specific use case with this exchange for monitoring and load frequency control, and what is a very important point, that we are coming to a successful result within the next, I would say, 1.5 years. Why? It's a question of trust. Because we are doing the stuff, we explain to the business what we are doing, and they want to see a kind of result, which is quite clear, because they need the digital products in the control centers. And when we are creating the trust, because we are explaining, we are on the journey, we are working on the topic, you will see good results in the next 1 or 2 years. And they really get the results. Then they are building trust, and you're getting more and more support and alliances to go into the next level. And this step-by-step iterative approach, building trust and then growing with the challenges, is part of the game, and is the way forward how we are pushing the topic.
Great. And what's enabled you to trust Peter to start with, and their work? Is it the fact that it is, open source, and you can you can examine the code and what is leading to this trust with another operator. I mean, you have shared objectives, but I mean, I think being able to build off of the work of others is essential. And I'd like to better understand what are those pieces that led you, since you're really leading on this.
For us, the good starting point, and that was simply to explain and to be very clear and honest about the question of what your challenge is. And when talking with the Energinet guys and hearing their challenges and our challenges, you observe it's more or less the same. I had a speak with the E.ON colleagues with their E.ON project last week. We talked about their challenges, our challenges. They are more from the perspective of distributed system operator, we from a transmission system operator side. When talking about the challenge, it's quite comparable. We also talk with suppliers and their challenges in the energy transition. When you're looking from the perspective of the software engineering and creating products and the story behind, also there are quite the same challenges. And I believe in this complete ecosystem of having research companies, having research institutes, having DSOs, TSOs, some ISOs, having supplier companies, I believe we share the same challenges. And when we are talking quite honest about these challenges, then there is a good common sense which is creating the purpose and the trust to work together.
Excellent. I mean, I think this is shared, and there's an understanding in this community that we do share these problems all over, the challenges all over the world, and we're not competing against each other. So what do you see as kind of the platforms that we can be using to share? I mean, obviously one, LF Energy and the open source on the code, but then it's also, as we know, a human challenge. I'm just wondering, how do you guys, since you're not always we're not going to scale as quickly just by the conversations we unfortunately happen to have with each other. What do you think is needed potentially to accelerate this? We'll start with Lucian.
Maybe to answer your question, I would like to come to the trust topic, because it's at the core of that. And when we started our open source journey, the first point that was obvious to me was, if we would just ask other parties to join an RT project and to invest, it would be difficult for us to be attractive and to create trust. And trust has various dimensions. There is a governance dimension. So how do I trust that if I invest in a collaboration, it will be in my interest and I will be able to fulfill my interest in the long run and preserve that? How can I make sure that my voice will be heard? How can I make sure that if the other party changes its strategy, I do not lose my investment? And then there is also a technical aspect. How can I trust that the good software development practices are in place, that the software quality is at the top level, that we have a great cybersecurity practices, etc.? And well, for us, the answer to that was, well, as a starting point, to get trust, let's reuse what works elsewhere. So the starting point of LF Energy was just copy-paste. We took what worked in other industries, telecom, etc., copy-paste, and very easy. Obviously, since then, we have worked on adapted things, etc., also taking into account our specificities, but this was a great starting point to get trust. And then, by practicing, also starting small and then learning from that, we also increase confidence and trust. So that was for the governance aspect, also for the technical practices, etc. And also another aspect important to consider is that we don't just take code from the internet and use it internally. We cannot trust this kind of approaches. So what we need is to have confidence in the technical mastership of what we are deploying with open source technologies. And I see two ways to achieve that. So either we hire people and we involve them in those technical collaboration, and they got technical competence and they are able to let's say, influence the roadmap of those projects according to our needs to solve the issues, etc., the bugs. Or we can also look for third parties and subcontract with service companies, software service companies that are skilled in those open source projects and then can provide us the trust that we need to get support, etc.
That's great. So you don't have to also have all the in-house, you don't need a staff of 150, or if you don't have those resources, there are enough, there's an ecosystem out there. And Tim, I think you, tell me about your team. I think you have a growing team, but also are working with third parties outside to support you.
Yeah, I mean, we have some folks internal who usually develop the in-house stuff. And we have, of course, a lot of vendors who kind of help us, and yeah, you need to build trust up with them as well. And yeah, the end goal is always to treat even the external vendors like internal employees to a certain extent, because in the end we need to move together. We need to collaborate together. So we also need to have trust in each other. If we don't have the trust in each other and with the people you're working with, it doesn't really work. And this is, from a certain point of view, this transparency is kind of natural to open source, because yes, you can look at code into a very deep level, but also most of the people in that community are kind of transparent and honest. There's very little pieces of a hidden agenda, which sometimes you have with external vendors, which you don't really want to have. So this kind of transparency is kind of natural to the open source community. So yeah, when we have internal people, they like to look into the code. And if we have external vendors that are helping us and stuff, we also want them to be kind of transparent, and so we can treat them as our own employees to a certain extent.
Excellent. I don't know exactly how much time we have. About 5 minutes. Okay. Well, so I actually have 2 questions, but I'm going to let you pick which one you want to answer, each of you. And then I really want to open it up. We don't have, okay, we can open it up. Should we open it up? Yes. Questions?
Thank you. My name is Bruce Tulloch from the Trusted Energy Interoperability Alliance. A lot of what you've spoken to speaks to our playbook and what we're interested in. You have spoken a lot about the benefits of collaboration, the adoption of open source. One thing that you spoke referentially to but didn't address is the challenges that you have cooperating concerning legal issues, particularly IP, and how that's shared. And the other is how you manage interoperability from a cybersecurity and a secure interoperable basis across your different systems. So I wanted to speak to those 2 issues. Thank you.
Questions? Who wants to go first?
I can start if I got the question right. With IP, Swissgrid is very, bold. For stuff that we are building and stuff, if it's something not shared outside, we want to have the IP, because I mean, there's always a legal risk that the company that built it will go bankrupt, and then we even pay, for example, for escrow contacts, that if the company goes bankrupt, we will have the code. For open source, this is completely different. It's quite nice, actually. We haven't spent so much time investigating that, to be honest, but we kind of look at which kind of open source license is attached to the project if we use it. And there are certain ones that we quite like, and there are certain ones we don't like so much. And depending on that, I mean, with some of the licenses, you're quite free. If the company or something, or the association starts or stops maintaining it, yeah, we can have an internal fork, and we are not at the stage where we would like to publicly maintain it, but we are not at a legal stage where we really can do that with a good thought. But we will eventually get there. But even if it's only keeping the project alive, we're really happy to do that, because in the end, we used it for quite a long time. Somebody else maintained it for us. So if we have the resources internally to keep it going, if another company drops out, it's kind of what we need to do, to my extent.
Lucian, we spoke a little bit about IP. Do you want to, or Mirko?
Maybe a few additional points on this topic. So first, we had also to fight against a preconceived idea that is, when we share IP, we destroy value. And that is a common preconceived idea, and actually we had to demonstrate that it may be the opposite. So if we give away our IP, and then due to the fact that also in this open source collaboration, there is a virtuous circle, so that people are incentivized also to join us, because then we form a joint project, and then we benefit of each other's roadmap. So we can get the benefit of a third party's IP. And compared to a situation where we keep this IP internally, but we don't exploit it because we are not a software company, and it's only there primarily because of our needs, well, the cost-benefit ratio goes in favor of open source. Secondly, IP, open source licenses can also bring some securities in terms of IP, because indeed we are able to have reversibility from one service supplier to another through open source. We are ensured to be able to reuse this IP in the long run. Now, of course, it requires some attention, especially regarding the compliance aspects, how to make sure that licenses are compatible between each other. But that's okay. That has been largely solved by many industries. We have a lot of tooling, good practices to address that. And in that respect, it was quite straightforward for us to go to permissive open source licenses, because we wanted to also onboard the vendor ecosystem, etc. So, yeah.
Great. I think one more question. Fabulous.
Thank you. I'm here from the Norwegian TSO, and we were similarly placed to the Swissgrid in our terms of our adoption. So I have a practical question about how you go about generating this trust, especially pertaining to your comment about doing development in the shadows, as it were. How do you, in a snappy way, generate trust internally in a system-critical, mission-critical organization? Thank you.
Very good question. Basically, by one of the starting points, which is working quite well on our side, is by simply showing and let them compare. So I give you one example. We started to invest into how to use Panda Power, but also possible in generating load flow and N-1 calculations. And we simply integrated into the MCCS environment, which is quite simply new. One column with the results we are calculating based on the solutions and components. And we added a second column with the today's existing legacy component who is in the real operational runtime calculating the stuff. And being completely transparent with the fact that they are able to compare the results, maybe also identifying that there are some aspects which are not the same and where there are gaps. And simply starting the discussion about it. And the funny point is behind, we not only identified gaps, what we can improve based on using open source components, in the same way we identified errors which are existing in the legacy component and which were there for years and decades and nobody observed. Because in the beginning, nobody has compared. And what is the real answer to have an appropriate N-1 calculation? You are trust. And basically in the past you are trusting the legacy component. Now you are making a very hard transparency into the fact that you are having two columns and let them compare and let them discuss. And this is very helpful. And to be clear on that, this is simply not claiming against legacy components, but it's simply making a transparent process so that we have the opportunity to learn and to understand what we can improve. And maybe this is in addition to that, quite often the trust is not only by having a component or a methodology or an algorithm, you need also to trust that you are working with good data. And quite often the quality of the solutions we are providing in Control Center is not only relying to the software components, it's also relying to the data. And we should also look into that. And by making this transparency, at least for us, it was a very good starting point to build the trust.
Excellent. I think that's probably a good place to end. Transparency and trust. The tech is there. It's the human part that's going to drive us forward. Yes. Thank you. Thanks to the panelists and
Thanks, guys.
Telefinity.